All good. The floor
All
is
right,
yours.
lovely. Well, look, thanks, Jean-Sébastien. So as JS said, these snapshots are a great output from the ENSMOV Plus project, a kind of flagship output. And I've been working with Jean-Sébastien to bring these towards publication. Just to say, I work for the Regulatory Assistance Project, so we're one of the partners in the ENSMOV Plus project being led by IECP. So here's what I'm going to cover today. So just a very quick backwards look to what we did in 2019, which the success of which influenced our decision to update the snapshots. Then having a look at some of the changes very briefly to the Energy Efficiency Directive's energy savings obligation since 2019, which of course gives rise to our decision to redo the exercise. Some headline data from what member states have reported so far in the 2021 to 2030 period, and then I'll come on to the snapshots. So very quick overview. I can't possibly go through them all. And then I'm going to pick out a few themes that have emerged from them, particularly from the interviews that we carried out in the process of producing them. So very quickly, this is what we did in 2019. And so here's one from Ireland, for example. So this was a snapshot about the energy efficiency obligation scheme in Ireland. And you can see it was 3 pages and a sort of description, some results, and then an interview. And then the same thing we did for alternative measures. So here's one from Germany. Of course, Germany doesn't have an obligation scheme. And again, a 3-page snapshot. These we felt, we understand from feedback that these are really useful resource. And actually in my own work outside of the project, I've also found these resources to be incredibly useful in enabling one to understand very quickly what's going on in different member states, and also to draw comparisons between member states' strategies. So that's what we did in 2019. But as I said, things have changed since then. We've got the 2023 revision to the EED, and well, there are many changes, but the 3 most important ones are perhaps these. So clearly, the ambition in terms of how much energy must be saved has increased. We can see the step change in the new annual savings rate from 0.8% in 2021 to 23 through to 1.9% in 28 to 30. And of course, from 2031 onwards, that 1.9% rate will stay in place. The obvious thing that I'm sure everyone already knows on this webinar is that it's a cumulative energy savings obligation. So even though we see a step change towards the end of the period in terms of ambition for new annual savings, the earlier you can make those savings from policy measures that have long lifetimes, the easier it is for member states to meet those obligations. And that cumulative approach is of course in line with the broader energy transition objectives in our climate targets, which are all about saving carbon, and the sooner we can save it, the better it is for the accumulation of emissions in the atmosphere. The second area was, of course, the ensuring a just and inclusive energy transition by having a share of energy savings to be achieved among priority groups. And this new ring fence will help member states to tackle energy poverty. And this kind of social element to the EED is something that we can see factored in throughout the Fit for 55 package of measures that came in during 2023 and 2024. And the third one was aligning the obligation with climate goals by ensuring that savings from fossil fuel technologies are gradually ineligible in terms of the savings reported from them. So this is things like replacing a fossil fuel boiler with another fossil fuel boiler, or replacing an internal combustion engine vehicle with another internal combustion engine vehicle. So there are, of course, many other smaller changes in the EED energy savings obligations, Articles 8 to 10 and Annex 5, but these are the 3 main ones. So how have member states' strategies changed? we looked at some of the data that member states have submitted in their NECPRs. So these are the National Energy and Climate Plan reports in 2023 and 2025, and also at their National Energy and Climate Plans, including the most recently updated ones. Well, first though, let's have a look at the NECPR data. And we can see here that member states in the main have clearly taken on the need to take early action. So if we compare it to the original 2019 EED requirement to make savings at 0.8% per year, new annual savings, we can see that most countries were already overachieving on that requirement in the 2021 to 2023 period. So these data are essentially the averages of the new annual savings reported in 2021, 22, and 2023. And if you're above 0% here, that means that you've reported more savings in new annual terms than you needed to. However, if we think about where we need to get to for 2031 and beyond, so we need to be getting towards 1.9%, then we can see that only a few member states are already overachieving on that 1.9% per year requirement. Now, of course, as I've already said, it's a cumulative target. So in fact, you don't have to make 1.9% savings in either 2021 or 2030. In fact, it averages out at about 1.44% throughout the period. So that's one thing to say when one's thinking about how to interpret these data. And the other thing to think about, of course, is that not all policy measures have savings that last until the end of the period. And to the extent that member states are relying on taxation policy measures with 1-year lifetimes, or perhaps some information sharing policies that also have short lifetimes, then they'll need to be making higher savings rates than 0.8 or 1.9% earlier in the piece to take account of the fact that their policy measures have savings that don't last throughout the period to 2030. So just a couple of things to bear in mind when looking at this chart. But I mean, I think probably the main takeaway to take from it is the diversity of savings reported amongst member states, which gives rise to the need for this type of project, ENSMOV Plus, which enables member states to share their experiences and learn from each other. Now, if that was a bit difficult to interpret, then let's have something that's a little bit easier to interpret. So these are the expected energy savings in 2021 to 2030. This is from the NECP updates mainly, compared to what was achieved in the 2014 to 2020 period, split by the policy measure type. And I guess the thing that you can, well, a couple of things you really notice when you look at the 2021 to 2030 period is the big increase in financing scheme subsidy instruments, 32% 2021 to 2030, 15% in 2014 to 2020. The savings from the obligation schemes have also increased a little bit. And on the flip side, the energy and CO2 tax savings are reducing quite a lot. And that's not because energy and CO2 taxes have decreased necessarily. It's more to do with the length of the period. So between 2021 and 2030, we've got 10 years worth of savings to make. 2014 to 2020, we only had 7 years. So relatively speaking, because taxation measures have shorter lifetimes, their proportionate contribution to meeting member states' targets will be lower. Nevertheless, the increase in the financing scheme instruments percentage compared to the obligation schemes is quite noticeable. And I'll be coming on to that in a little bit more detail when I look at the interview responses to questions about strategies for the 2024 to 2030 period. Then in terms of the end use sectors, we're back to some data that are a little bit more difficult to interpret, and that's mainly because so many policy measures are cross-cutting. So obligation schemes in the EU, at any rate, are all cross-cutting. So some of them will be more focused on industry, some of them more on buildings, and it's difficult to disaggregate that cross-cutting section. I guess it's worth noticing that the residential share seems to be increasing. Again, that might be something to do with the longer lifetimes associated with buildings measures. At the same time, it might be something to do with the EPBD coming in and the requirements there around building renovation, minimum energy performance standards, although they're in the commercial sector. But there are the trajectories for improving residential buildings. So it's really hard to know exactly what's driving these data. And it would be ideal if we could dig under the bonnet a bit more on those cross-cutting savings. Okay, so those are some of the high-level data. Now let's move on to the fact sheets that we're advertising today. So have a look on the platform. I don't know what the answers to the questions, your first question was, Jean-Sébastien, but this is where we keep all of the resources from our project. And you can see here the distribution of countries between those that have just an obligation scheme, that's France, just alternative measures, that's quite a lot, and obligation schemes and alternative measures, quite a lot as well. So we have, when we've done the fact sheets, the snapshots, if they've got an obligation scheme, we have assessed that scheme. And if they're a partner country, we also look at an alternative measure. If they are an outreach country, so a country where we don't have a partner involved in our consortium, then we just look at one policy measure. And if they've got an obligation scheme, it's the obligation scheme. If they don't, then we've chosen an alternative measure. They are in draft at the moment, those that are online, and more will come online over the coming weeks. Please take a look, and if you have any comments, please get back to us. Before the end of October, the project will end of November, but we're open to comments on the snapshots that will be online until the 31st of October. So if you notice a mistake, obviously let us know. And if you've just got any comments, then we'd be really grateful to hear from you. So yes, sorry, I'll probably just explain this. So, but essentially, we've got more background than in the 2019 fact sheets. We focus on one or two measures depending on, as I said, whether it's a partner country or an outreach country. And then the interviews, these are super interesting, and these are with national experts. And let's go on to have a quick look at some of the responses that we got from our interviewees. And I've tried to draw out some themes. So let's have a look. Oh, first of all, sorry, here's an example of a snapshot. So this is from Luxembourg, which I worked on. They are an outreach country, so we've just gone for one policy measure, which is the obligation scheme. And you can see that it's similar but longer than the previous one. So there's more detail, essentially. Some background in the first page or two, then we move on to the obligation scheme for 3 or 4 pages, quite a lot of detail. And then we move on to the interview. And we did 2 interviews with Pascal Roche from the Ministry for Economy in Luxembourg. Okay, so the interviews. What are the themes that emerged? So, well, the first question we asked interviewees was about the general approach to the 2024 to 2030 period, given that it's from then that the increase in ambition of the energy savings obligation takes place. Now, there were diverging responses to all the questions, but these are kind of the 3 key headings that I was able to draw out of the answers to this question. So one was around increasing sector coverage. The second one was around the alternative measures, sorry, AM for short, in case you don't know what that means. So the alternative measures taking more of the burden. And then the third one was a focus on cost effectiveness. So these were kind of 3 themes that I found. In terms of the sector coverage, so I think there really was variation. So some people were saying we're going to focus more on the building sector. That is absolutely true. But I would say more people were saying we need to look beyond the building sector and looking at sectors where perhaps efficiency policy has not ventured so far in the past, at least in some countries, whether that's heavy industry, transport, beyond sort of vehicle replacement, but into broader sort of area-based schemes, and indeed into sectors like waste and water. So definitely looking for new savings outside of the regular places where policymakers have searched in the past. Alternative measures taking more of the burden. Now, this is proportionately, so compared to obligation schemes, I don't think any policymakers were saying they were going to reduce the ambition of their obligation scheme from 2024 or 2025. It was just more that they might be increasing the ambition, but relatively speaking, compared to the increase in the target of Article 8, they were going to be looking for alternative measures to bear more of that burden. And this, I don't know, but I would hypothesize that this is to do with not burdening bill payers with the costs, and given the particular environment we're in right now. It might be also to do with obligation schemes, being best suited in many contexts, France aside, to making some of the cheaper, more cost-effective savings so that all members of society can benefit from them, as opposed to the more expensive actions that require more investment. Amongst the alternative measures, there was quite some discussion around mobilizing more EU funding, particularly the Social Climate Fund for member states that will be participating in ETS2. But then in other countries where there's a carbon tax already and perhaps an opt-out from ETS2, then increasing the carbon tax is something that is, may already be baked into legislation and will provide more energy savings. A focus on cost effectiveness. This was something that was absolutely a key consideration from many of our interviewees, and moving beyond subsidies. I mean, we've been hearing that actually subsidies are going to play a huge role, but policymakers are seeing that they really do need to move beyond subsidies and find perhaps some more innovative schemes, and both auctions and on-bill financing were measures that were mentioned by interviewees. Then delivering amongst priority groups. So we've got a few dedicated schemes. There's a big debate around moving beyond social policy that I noticed amongst some of our interviewees. And also there was some discussion around how to reach diverse priority groups. So it's not just sort of one priority group that people are trying to reach. Amongst the dedicated schemes, quite a few 100% grant schemes. So this is schemes aimed at people on low incomes or in receipt of welfare benefits, for example. Again, there was a lot of discussion around mobilizing the Social Climate Fund in this respect. As I said, a lot of debate around moving beyond social policy. It seems that in some countries, there is a very, very strict dichotomy between social policy and energy policy, and energy poverty has been in the social policy box. And but given the way in which the EED has moved, then there's had to be a sort of mind shift within the government in some countries, which can be quite painful, I think, in some countries, from what I can judge from the interviews. But there's a general recognition that energy poverty, the root cause of energy poverty lies in the energy sector, or at least the energy performance of buildings. So I think this has been broadly welcomed, this focus on priority groups, if not necessarily the size of the target. Some examples of ways in which countries are moving beyond social policy. So obligation schemes, different approaches. We have sub-targets in some countries, uplifts in other. So this is where obligated parties in an obligation scheme receive more credit if they make savings in priority groups. And in at least one obligation scheme, there was essentially there was a kind of levy created within the scheme. So obligated parties were putting money into a pot that was then used by the government to make savings amongst low-income groups. Also quite some focus on information provision to ease the customer journey for people on low incomes, to make them more likely to sign up for the generous subsidies that might be on offer. Information provision through one-stop shops being an example. Then in terms of the diversity groups, the priority group, we heard about reaching both privately and publicly owned buildings, so social housing and particularly the owner-occupier sector. The private rented sector still seems to be problematic in many countries in terms of reaching those buildings. And then there was some interesting discussion around working with community groups. So in two ways, actually. One way is in identifying those people most at need, so working with people working in the community. And then a second one is around community energy projects themselves. So community energy projects tend to be associated with renewable energy or maybe storage these days, but also using community energy projects to fund collective efficiency schemes where you take advantage of economies of scale. So some quite interesting interview responses there. Then so a couple, just last two slides. So one is some generic lessons from evaluations. So three key things here: design your policy in line with Article 8 and Annex 5, build on existing measures, and early action is crucial. So in terms of designing policy in line with what's in the EED, two things came out. On the obligation scheme side, aligning obligated parties' incentives with the cumulative targets that member states have. If you allow them to make annual savings as opposed to lifetime savings, it's basically going to not, their incentives will not be aligned with what member states have to report. And then just building in reporting requirements from the start for all policy measures so that it's not painful to try and work out what the savings are ex post. Building on existing measures, this was quite a theme actually. It's not, not reinventing the wheel. One interviewee said fewer larger measures rather than many smaller ones, but I kind of picked up that theme in some of the other responses, albeit implicitly. And then having a consistent approach, building market confidence, so not chopping and changing. So kind of build on existing policy measures seemed to be a theme that was coming through. And then early action is crucial. I don't have anything else to say on that, but pretty much everyone mentioned it. Final slide, so main challenges ahead. So this is where our interviewees were asked to sort of bare their soul. And we've got three things that I really noticed coming out of this. So the main challenges, just the sheer ambition of Article 8 was definitely one theme. Second, the complexity of Article 8. And then thirdly, the political environment. So on the ambition of Article 8, particularly delivering amongst the priority group was seen by some of our interviewees as something that was going to be really difficult for them. And then just actually finding the funds in both the private and the public sectors to deliver on the savings rates that are required is a tough ask when they're looking to secure funding within their own governments. On the complexity of Article 8, again, the monitoring of savings among the priority group subtarget again came out as a theme, where some interviewees were finding it difficult to work out what savings were being made amongst priority groups and measuring them. And then on the political environment, number of things came through here, but first actually was on ETS2. So there is at least a perception amongst some people that ETS2 either won't happen or will be different than it currently is set in the legislation, or it will happen. It seems that at least some of our, maybe this is only one interview actually, but there was some clarity on ETS2 was needed, mainly because if you're designing an obligation scheme, for example, you need to understand how many costs are going to be passed through to your bill payers before you make a decision on the size of your obligation scheme. So this kind of at least perception of uncertainty was creating a little bit of a political difficulty. Secondly, on inclusion, ensuring that no groups in society are excluded from energy efficiency policies. I mean, this is kind of a broader issue for the energy transition generally, but I think applies also to energy efficiency policy measures. And then finally, and this one is perhaps a little bit provocative for this group, but support for efficiency has subsided since the energy crisis. And, it's certainly true that the EED 2023 was negotiated at a moment when the energy crisis was absolutely at its peak and the value of energy savings was clearly very, very high in terms of tackling that particular crisis. Now the crisis has subsided somewhat, so at least the perception of an interviewee was, so is the support for energy efficiency. And certainly we also see as the energy transition progresses, as we see electrification taking hold, switch to electricity, the need for flexibility alongside efficiency, the need to tackle grid constraints, all these things are happening alongside energy efficiency policy delivery. And it would seem to me that efficiency policy will probably have to adapt as we move towards the end of the decade to face the new reality in terms of consumption of electricity versus fuels. So JS, there you are. There's what I hope were some interesting insights from our interviewees, and I can't wait till we get some more interviews to analyze, because I think these interview responses are some of the most interesting parts of the snapshots. There's some contact details, and I will pass back to you, Jean-Sébastien.
Thanks a lot, Sam. That's, I think, a very useful overview to see the current trends. And we will complement that with our panel today to deep dive in 4 countries and learn how these countries see the achievements they had recently and the coming years. And we will start going to Spain, where they started a white certificate scheme, as you said, in 2023, January 2023. And I'm happy to welcome Adrián Ruiz Soriano, who is Head of Unit on Energy Efficiency and Access at MITECO, the Spanish Ministry for Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge. So Adrián, what could you say to us about the first results? What you want to highlight from the first years of implementation of this new scheme?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Jean-Sébastien, for the introduction. Yes, like you mentioned, we released our system early 2023. And although we released the Royal Decree creating the system in 2023 and early 2023, it was not until late 2023 that we start having the first interventions on energy efficiency. So we have a later start in 2023. We release, the white certificate scheme in Spain works in 2 separate ways. We have standardized measures and we have non-standard measures. So we release a first catalog of 52 standardized energy efficiency measures in late 2023. So it really wasn't until late 2023 that we could start collecting on new energy saving interventions. So also the way our scheme works is that there is a third-party verification. So anything that, like any new measure, has to come with a positive verification document from a third-party verificator. Okay, so the beginning in 2023 was a bit slow, but we started catching up all through 2024. In June 2024, we released additional standardized measures. So we are now north of 114 standardized measures. I think we are 116 actually. We have a full catalog that covers residential, industrial, like agricultural, etc. So it's been now that we've widened our catalog that we have started getting more and more interventions on energy efficiency. So also the way our system works, we have different authorities. So although we are responsible for energy policy, it is the regions actually the ones that have to issue the white certificate. We are only at the ministry, the national register point. Okay, so the way the system works is that any energy efficiency intervention must come with a positive third-party evaluation, and is sent onto the regional authority, which issues the certificates, and then we at the ministry register them, and we have like a nationwide registry for all the interventions. Also, it's important to explain that we have on one hand applications and interventions. Okay, so any given application can contain up to 15 interventions. So I'm going to show you just one slide on how the system has performed so far. We're really thrilled with the performance, but I have to explain this a little bit. Okay, so on the red line, just let me know if you see my slide.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, this is okay. So the red line is the number of applications, not the number of interventions. Okay, so this is like I said, in 2023 we did almost nothing. We did only 2,000 gigawatts of energy savings, but all through 2024 we start catching wind, and from 2025 and going on, we've been consistently getting more and more savings. So these are cumulative values, but just to show you at glance, we did 1,900 gigawatts in 2024, and so far in 2024 we are north of 2.5 gigawatts in applications. Some of these files are rejected; they don't end up in a final energy saving certificate issued, like a 5% of this. But as you see, there's a significant increase, and so far we are really happy with the performance. So, I mean, month by month, you see that we start catching up. This is number of applications, and the bars are for savings in gigawatts, and you see that we are getting more and more and more every month. So, coming back to your question, we are happy with the performance so far. We have more than 750 obliged subjects, out of which maybe 50 to 60% are participating and trading with white certificates. So the obliged subjects are accepting and are using the system. We have north of 60 delegated subjects who are ESCOs, who are energy companies who help gather those savings, who can also act in the secondary market. They can trade certificates and sell certificates to the obligated subjects, and we have 10 or 11 third-party companies who verify those savings. So right now, in almost 2 years, less than 2 years, we have a whole ecosystem that is working. We're getting more and more savings. The system is getting to speed, and right now, the issues that we are facing is, first of all, our capability to handle all those new applications. It's a lot of work, so we are implementing a system to be able to gather all the information and being quick, because also the way the Spanish certificate system works is we say administrative silence is positive. So because every intervention is certified by a third party, if we are not able to issue the certificate within 30 or 45 days, depending on whether if it's a standardized or a singular intervention, we must issue the certificate. So we have to be really quick, reviewing everything, making sure that everything is fine, and issuing those certificates. And that, I think, it's a positive thing about the system, because obliged subjects are happy with the performance, because they get their investments back in the way of certificates very quickly, which they can trade. They can trade with other obliged subjects, or they can use to pay their obligation of the year. So I think that's a key point of the way the system is performing. And